Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. I've always loved baskets, and especially when people mount baskets on the wall as a sort of display. But I don't know how to weave baskets, so I've been looking for materials and techniques that I could use to recreate that look, and I've found some. Let's go have some fun.
This first technique uses piping and yarn, and I have here some Wright's piping cord, and it's 3/16 inch. Any size would work. This just happens to be what I have. And I have some yarn from the Dollar Tree here. This color is taupe, and I do think that maybe a thicker yarn or a more variegated yarn, such as the grayish tweed, might actually work a little bit better for this. Now, this technique I learned from Duenne Schlarman. She has a wonderful video, and I'm going to link it in the description because she really explains this very carefully, step by step, so you cannot make a mistake if you follow her video. I think that she is an art teacher. And I'm going to begin by making a little hook out of a paper clip. This is a large paper clip, and I'm going to unwind it and then make just a small hook at the end with some needle nose pliers that I have. We're going to use this to hook the yarn and pull it through our structure as we build it. I'm also going to taper the end of my piping because that will make it a little bit easier to cover over. Now begin by cutting a length of the yarn, and I'm going to cut this to about 3 yards long, but how long it is doesn't really matter. Then take your yarn and begin winding it around the end of the piping, winding it away from yourself. And once you have enough to bend it over and make a little loop, do that, and then continue winding around both pieces. Again, winding away from yourself, and then you'll eventually, once you wind past that taper, you'll be winding on the new piece of the cord. Once you've wound enough that you can bend it over and it's basically even with that hole that you made when you did the initial loop, then you're going to fasten it together by bringing the yarn up in between the old piece and the new piece, and then inserting your paper clip straight end through that loop, hook on to your yarn, and pull the yarn, all of the yarn, through that loop. Now it's going to be on the back. Bring it up and between the two pieces again so you can continue winding away from yourself. Now you're going to pick a number of winds, number of times that you wind around before you do the pull through and fasten again. So I think I picked 15 here. I've also tried 12. It just depends on your yarn and what feels right for your piping and your yarn. But stick to that number. Occasionally, you might have to go a little bit further or a little bit less far if your yarn isn't long enough, or if that number happens to line you up exactly with a place where you hooked through before. So do that number of loops and then pull your yarn up so it's between the old and the new. Insert your paper clip through the next loop over, hook it, and pull the yarn through, and then bring it up again so it's up towards you and loop away from yourself. This early part is uncomfortable. It is difficult for your hands, at least it was for mine. I felt like I had to hold it very tight, and my hands were getting a little bit stiff. But as you continue around, it gets much easier and less painful. So one thing I found is that I tended to have those little white spaces showing through where I did pull through and fasten the two pieces of piping together. And so one strategy you can try is to first wrap sort of almost backwards around that place where you pulled through, or slide your yarn a little bit so that you're able to get at that white space and cover it up. So this was my first time making one of these, and it took me a little bit of time to figure out some strategies to make my coverage better. Once you're nearing the end of your yarn, you're going to want to fasten that together. So do a pull up and pull through and pull up again, and then lay your end of yarn against your piping, lay a new piece of yarn against the piping along with it, and then begin wrapping with the new piece of yarn. And remember to wrap away from yourself. And then just continue, and you're going to make this as large as you like. This is another one of those activities that once you get started with it and you get the hang of it, you can do it almost anywhere. So at your kid's soccer game, or in front of the TV, or while you're chatting with friends. If you like to have busy hands and you like to craft, this is a great activity. Once I had about a 9-inch diameter, I decided that that was a good size, and I cut and tapered my piping. And then I just continued to wrap and fasten to the prior coil as I went along. And then once I was close to the end, close to where that taper is, I continually pushed it through. So I was wrapping around both that tapered end and the coil before it. And then to finish that off, I think you want to do that on the back. If this is going to be a wall hanging or a mat, then you have a back and a front. And I tried first with a yarn needle, but it was just too thick. So I found it was easier to pull the yarn through that double wrapping using the paper clip. Now I am going to be showing in a future video how to do this with 2 colors at once, so you can make a pattern that is an intentional pattern. But here I thought I would just try wrapping on top of the wrapping to make a pattern. So I used some pins to sort of measure out where I wanted to do that additional color. So I have some lovely colors of yarn here, all from the Dollar Tree. I have white, terracotta, pecan, and I think this is charcoal. And I used all of those except the pecan, which is the sort of the brown color. I used pins to mark out where I wanted to weave through, and you can see I wove through more than one coil at a time. Now, of course, this is a little tricky because the coils spiral, so you're going to have to sort of fudge it. I wove through 4 coils, and I used the sort of top coil as a guide, but I figured if I wove through 4 coils, it would look close enough to symmetrical. And I tried to make a sort of a wedge shape there, rather than having the top and the bottom of that the same width. So I did 4 of those. And the only trick here is, of course, in some places there might be a little piece of yarn which is linking the coils together. So you just have to sort of fiddle with it a little bit to get it to cover up any of those taupe areas. And then I thought maybe I would just put a couple of little strands of the white on either side of those little charcoal pieces. And those are just going over one coil. And then I do really love this terracotta color, so I thought I would do a little bit of a different design with that. So I did some straight lines, and then I did a sort of an X over the middle of that. And then I decided that I was just going to almost completely cover some rows around the edge. So of course, originally I could have used those colors instead of the taupe. And so if you wanted to do this, you can start a new color by, instead of laying your new taupe piece under, lay a new charcoal piece under and start wrapping with the charcoal. And again, I will do something like that in a future video, maybe even this Thursday. But here what I did was I laid one piece of the charcoal along one of the coils that went all the way around. And again, it's not going to meet because it's a spiral. And then I wrapped over it. And of course you can't wrap completely because of those pieces which link the coils together. So I didn't try to. I left a little bit of space between each of those little wrappings. But it has that one piece underneath so that gives it just a little bit more, I guess, color. And then I did the same thing with a terracotta, and then I did another charcoal, and here's the finished piece. Now this next piece is pretty easy to make. I was going for more of a basket look, so I have a 14-inch wreath form from the Dollar Tree here, and I'm just going to trace around that because that's easier than drawing a 14-inch circle with a homemade compass, since my compass isn't that big. And I just cut around that. That's on a thick piece of cardboard, same cardboard I used to make my llama. And I just cut around that with a box cutter knife. And again, I'm going to use sort of a similar technique to my llama, the llama with the sort of basket covering. I'm going to use some white glue with some water mixed in, and I'm going to use some gauze bandages. And I'm going to paper mache or decoupage. I'm going to cover the cardboard with the gauze. And that's just going to give it a nice white background that will be easy to adhere to. And so once that is dry, I'm going to attach some of this millinery straw, which I'm going to get from taking apart some of these Dollar Tree hats. And these come in a lot of different colors. Here I have a tan, a black, and a sort of a lighter tan color. And so I'm taking the ribbons off, and then you just find the place where the hat begins along the brim and snip it. They're held together with either clear plastic thread or, in the case of the black hat, black plastic thread. So just snip it and then basically rip, and you can just pull that apart. The tag is sewn on with thread, so you're going to want to snip the thread off and remove the tag. And I always leave the circle in the center of the hat in case I want a circle. That way I don't have to remake the circle. And then once you've done that, you're going to want to pull off all the thread that was sewing the hat together. So just, again, it's just a sort of a rip thing. So I did that for all three hats, and then I found the center of my circle, and then I realized that was not the correct approach. What you want to do is center your hat center in the middle of the cardboard, which means make sure that each of the edges is the same distance from the cardboard. So once I did have it actually dead center, because it's a spiral, the center of it isn't, or the center of the spiral isn't really the center of the piece, I then did a little bit of adjusting to make sure that each edge was the same distance from the edge of the cardboard. But once I had that figured out, I just glued it down with white glue. So just get some glue on it, spread it around so that every piece of it is glued down. And then just as I did with the llama, I'm just using straight pins to pin it in place. And then what I decided to do was do some circles around that. So I did a circle around the light tan with the black. And then I thought it would be interesting to have some shapes sort of radiating from the center. So I took the darker tan and glued some pieces down. And now I'm going to go over and under that with the other colors. So I went over it with black and then under it with the light tan and then over it with black again, and I put down some new pieces. So if you go over the bottom of it, you can't see that part where it's sort of glued on, and it looks a little bit more organic and woven that way. And just glue those pieces on in whatever pattern you think looks good. Now the finishing it off was a little bit tricky. So I think what I would recommend is maybe getting some either cloth seam binding or a piece of ribbon and gluing that around the edge. Because what I tried to do was bend one of these pieces of millinery straw so that it came around the front, and then also a little bit over in the back. And I ended up, you can see so many pins, I ended up gluing it to the front first, and then pulling it around and gluing it to the back, and then I had to do some repairs on the front, and then I ended up taping it with some duct tape on the back because it was just really difficult to get it to bend. It's not real straw, I'm calling it millinery straw, but it's some sort of synthesized material, some sort of plasticky material. It doesn't bend when you get it wet, at least not in my experience, so there isn't really an easy way to shape it. So I would say for this to have a tidier finish on the edge, I would just use a different material, something that's more flexible. Alright, and for our final piece, I'm going to use the same technique that we used for the first piece, but I'm going to use different materials. So here I'm using the Dollar Tree nautical rope, and this is the sort of jute colored nautical rope. And I have two pieces here, but I'm just going to use one of them and make a small piece. I think you could make it, whatever size you like by joining pieces together. And then I also have this raffia ribbon string. And at first I was hoping I would be able to spread this out because this is basically paper that's sort of folded up. But this was very weak. I have some of this, I've had it for a really long time, and it's thicker and sturdier. This I just bought because I wanted more colors. So this was weaker than I would have hoped, and so I was not able to open it up to use it. I had to use it the size that it is. But the technique is exactly the same, except we're going to change colors with this one. And not in a specific pattern, we're just going to change colors as we run out of a color. So start wrapping it and then fold it over so you get a little loop and wrap over both pieces, and then continue to wrap until you can bend it over, and then you're going to use the same little paperclip tool, put it through the hole and pull the raffia through. And remember to always wrap away from yourself, so you're always going to pull it up between those two coils and then start wrapping away from yourself again. So what I did was 2 lengths of red, and you join it the same way as before, where you take your little tail and then you take your new piece, hold it along the rope with the little tail, and again start wrapping away from yourself. So I did the red, and then once I had run out of the 2 pieces of red, I switched to green. Once I had run out of the 2 pieces of green, I switched to the tan or tannish yellow color. And you can see that when you switch colors, you get little stripes on the color before from where you join the 2 pieces. So that's kind of fun. And this was similar, where it was a little hard to work with at first, but it got much easier. And then you finish it off the same way. It was much easier if you taper it, the rope, and just wrap around both pieces when you finish it off. And I just almost tied it on the back. Now there was one spot in the middle where you could see the rope through, and so I just took a little piece of the red and covered up that one spot. So I just put it through and I just taped it on the back. You're not going to see the back of it, but I think, if you're more careful, that doesn't happen. Or maybe you could slide it through the pieces on the back. I thought I would probably mess it up if I tried to do that. And then just to relate this a little more to the other pieces, because the colors here are really quite different, I took a little bit of jute twine and some white glue, and I just put the glue in the spaces between the coils, and I put the jute twine in there, and I just pressed it in. That was, very easy to do, but I thought it just gave it a little bit more of a finish that's more similar in color to the other pieces, so it related it more to the other pieces. And here they are hanging on the wall. And that other piece is just some pom-poms that I made, and I just strung jute twine through them. I have a pom-pom tutorial if you want to make pom-poms. And then you can also, of course, use these as trivets or mats. So here is the first piece as a trivet. And here it is with a bowl on it.
So what did you think of our boho wall art, sort of faux baskets? Did you have a favorite? please tell me in the comments. I think that I really liked the ones that we made with this technique, and this one in particular I really liked. The other one, the one that I made with the millinery straw, I didn't think was particularly successful, but oh well, maybe I could figure out another way to do that one. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.